There is a kind of peace that does not come from solving your life. It comes from setting it down for a while. Tonight, we are going to explore that peace through Buddhist wisdom, Zen stories, and the simple practice of breathing and letting go. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The Buddhist and Zen masters have always returned to this simple teaching, that so much of our suffering comes from holding on to control, holding on to the need for life to be different than it is. But life keeps moving. The breath comes and goes. The river flows on. And slowly, we might begin to see that not everything needs to be carried. Tonight, through old stories and quiet teachings, we will sit with this one simple possibility, that maybe peace is not something we reach by trying harder. Maybe it begins when we stop holding so tightly. So let yourself settle in. Let the shoulders soften. Let the day begin to fall away. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. In the Buddhist scriptures, there is a phrase, the breath inside the breath. It points to something so close, so constant, that we almost never notice it. The life that moves through us with every inhale and exhale. The Zen masters taught that if we could truly feel even a single breath, that one breath would teach us everything we needed to know. There is a story about a young man who traveled a great distance to learn this. He arrived at the monastery on an autumn morning after weeks of walking. The monastery was small and plain, set among pine trees on a mountainside. There was a wooden gate, a stone path swept clean, a few simple buildings with thatched roofs. The sound of a stream somewhere nearby. The air smelled of pine, resin, and wood smoke. The young man had come because he had heard that the teacher who lived here was a master of Buddhist wisdom. He had heard that this teacher could explain the deepest truths of the Dharma with a single sentence. He had saved for months, left his family's farm, and walked through rain and heat and dust to reach this place. He was eager. He was ready. He wanted to begin. A monk met him at the gate and showed him to a small room with a straw mat and a window that looked out at the trees. "The teacher will see you when he is ready," the monk said. "In the meantime, eat, rest, and breathe." The young man waited. He waited that day, and the next after that. Each morning, a bell rang before dawn, and the monks moved quietly to the meditation hall. Each afternoon, they worked in the garden or carried water from the stream. Each evening, they ate a simple meal together in silence. The teacher was there, moving among them. A calm, older man with a weathered face and steady eyes. But he did not speak to the young man. He did not offer a teaching. He did not even seem to notice him. By the third day, the young man was restless. By the fifth, he was frustrated. He had not come all this way to sweep paths and eat rice in silence. He had come for wisdom. He had imagined long conversations about the nature of reality, about karma and rebirth, about the path to liberation. Instead, he had been given a broom and a bowl of soup. And yet, something was happening, even if he could not see it yet. The rhythm of the monastery was seeping into him. The bell before dawn, the quiet footsteps on stone, the bird song at first light, the smell of the kitchen fire. Without trying, without thinking about it, his body was beginning to slow down. His shoulders were a little less tight. His breathing, though he had not noticed it, had grown a little deeper. On the morning of the 7th day, he found the teacher sitting alone in the garden, watching a spider repair its web between two branches. "Forgive me," the young man said, bowing. "I have been here for 7 days. When will the teaching begin?" The teacher did not look away from the spider. He was quiet for so long that the young man thought perhaps he had not heard. Then the teacher said, "You have been breathing since you arrived, yes?" The young man blinked. "Of course." Then the teaching has already begun. You simply have not been paying attention." The young man sat down across from the teacher, confused. "I do not understand," he said. "I came here to learn the Dharma, the great truths, the path to awakening, and you are telling me about breathing?" The teacher smiled. It was a gentle smile, without any trace of mockery. "What do you think the Buddha taught his students when they came to him asking the very same questions you are asking now?" "I do not know. That is why I am here." He told them to sit down, to find a quiet place under a tree, at the foot of a hill, anywhere peaceful, and to feel the breath. A long breath, knowing it is long. A short breath, knowing it is short. A natural breath, simply feeling it come and go. That was the beginning of his teaching. And for many of his students, it was also the end. Just breathing? Just breathing. The young man looked down at his hands. "That seems too simple." "It is simple," said the teacher. "That is what makes it so easy to miss." He turned from the spider web and looked at the young man directly for the first time. "Tell me, in all the days you have been here, how many of your breaths have you actually felt?" The young man opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He had to be honest. "None," he said. "I have been too busy waiting for something important to happen." "And yet," said the teacher, "you have taken thousands of breaths since you arrived. Each one kept you alive. Each one was a gift, and you missed every single one." He said this kindly, without judgment. Do not feel bad about it. This is what all of us do. We are so busy looking for the extraordinary that we walk right past the ordinary, which is where the sacred actually lives. In many ancient languages, the words for breath and spirit are the same word. To inspire means to breathe in, but it also means to be filled with spirit. To expire means to breathe out for the last time. Respiration and spirit share the same root. The Buddhist teachers of the old world understood something we have largely forgotten. Breathing is not simply a mechanical process. It is the movement of life itself through the body. It is what separates the living from the still. The teacher stood and invited the young man to walk with him. They left the garden and followed a path that wound up the mountainside through the trees. The morning light came through the canopy in pale columns. The air was cool and clean. "Listen," said the teacher as they walked. "What do you hear?" "The wind," said the young man. "In the pine trees." "Yes, the wind. Now, what is wind?" "Moving air." "And what is breath?" The young man paused mid-step. "Moving air," he said, more slowly this time. "The same thing," said the teacher. "The wind that moves through these trees is the same air that moves through your lungs. There is no separation. When you breathe in the forest. When you breathe out, the forest breathes you in. The trees release what you need. You release what the trees need. You are in conversation with every living thing around you, all the time, through the breath. You have never been alone in your life. They walked in silence for a while, the young man turning this over in his mind. The Buddha called this into being, the teacher said. Nothing exists by itself. Everything breathes with everything else. The ocean breathes. The tides rise and fall like the chest of something vast and sleeping. The seasons breathe. Spring inhales and the world comes alive. Autumn exhales and the world lets go. He pointed to a cluster of wildflowers along the path, their petals wide open in the morning light. These will close when evening comes, and open again tomorrow. That is their breathing, the rhythm of opening and closing, receiving and releasing. It is everywhere you look. They stopped beside the stream that ran down from the higher slopes. The water moved over smooth stones, sometimes pooling into stillness, then spilling forward again. The teacher knelt and held his hand in the current. "Watch the stream," he said. "It does not push. It does not strain. When it meets a stone, it moves around it. When the ground is steep, it flows faster. When the ground levels, it slows and rests. It does not argue with the shape of the land. It simply follows it." "You are saying the breath is like a stream," said the young man. "I am saying the breath is a stream. It is water and air and life, all moving in the same way, all following the same law, the law of letting go. The stream does not hold on to the stone it passes. The breath does not hold on to the body it fills. Everything in nature receives and then releases, receives and releases. Only we try to hold on." The young man watched the water for a while. A leaf drifted past, turning slowly in the current. It did not struggle. It did not try to go upstream. It simply went where the water carried it. "Come," said the teacher. "Let us keep walking." They climbed higher. The trees thinned. The sky opened above them, wide and blue. They sat on a flat rock at the edge of a clearing where they could see the valley below, green and quiet, with the river winding through it like a silver thread. Do you know what the Buddha said when his students asked him for the path to peace? The teacher asked. "No," he said, "go to any quiet place. Sit with dignity and become aware of this life breath." He did not ask them to believe anything. He did not ask them to perform difficult rituals or study complicated texts. He asked them to feel what was already happening in their own bodies. The breath coming in, the breath going out. He said that this simple awareness, if nourished, would lead to understanding, to calm, and to freedom. The young man sat with this. Below them, the valley breathed in its own way. Mist rising from the river like slow exhalation. Birds circling in the updrafts. The steady pulse of the stream, visible now as a bright line in the distance. Why the breath? The young man asked. Why not something else? Why not study, or prayer, or good works? Because the breath is always here, the teacher said. You cannot lose it. You cannot leave it behind. It does not require any special knowledge or ability. A farmer can feel it. A child can feel it. It belongs to everyone equally. And it is always happening in this moment. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Now, whenever you feel the breath, you are here. and being here is where peace lives. But I breathe all the time and I am not at peace. The teacher laughed softly. You breathe all the time, yes, but you do not notice it. There is a difference between breathing and knowing that you are breathing. That knowing is what changes everything. It is like the difference between walking through a garden with your eyes closed and walking through the same garden with your eyes open. The garden is the same, but what you receive from it is completely different. They sat for a long while on that rock. The young man tried, for the first time, to simply feel his breathing. It was harder than he expected. His mind kept reaching for something more interesting, more important. But now and then, for a breath or two, he felt it. The air entering his body, cool and light. The quiet expansion of his chest. The soft release. And in those moments, something settled in him. Something he could not quite name. I knew a monk once, the teacher said, after some time had passed. He was very old when I met him. He had lived in a small hermitage in the hills for many decades, sitting each morning and evening with his breathing. I visited him when I was not much older than you. I asked him what he had learnt in all those years. What did he say? He said, I have learned that my life is very simple. It is just one breath, and then another breath. That is all it has ever been. I spent my younger years thinking life was something complicated, something to figure out. But it is not. It is just this, breathing in, breathing out, and being grateful for each one. The young man was quiet. He was not sad when he said this, the teacher added. He was the most peaceful person I have ever met. He had not figured out the meaning of life. He had simply stopped needing to. He had rested in the breath, and the breath had been enough. Did he teach you anything else? The young man asked. One more thing. I asked him if he ever grew restless, living alone in the hills, with nothing but his breathing for company. He said, restless? I am in conversation with every living thing. The trees breathe with me. The wind breathes with me. The grass, the insects, the birds. We are all breathing together, all the time. I have never had so much company in my life. The young man looked out at the valley. The morning light was full now, and everything below them seemed to glow. The forest, the fields, the river, all of it alive, all of it breathing. I think I am beginning to understand, he said quietly. Good, said the teacher. Understanding is a fine start, but feeling is better. Do not try to understand the breath. Just feel it. Let it be simple. The Buddhist tradition teaches that everything alive moves in rhythm. This is not a philosophical idea. It is something we can observe anywhere we look. The moon waxes and wanes, growing full and then thinning to nothing, then growing full again. The seasons turn, each one giving way to the next without resistance. The heart opens and closes, pumping blood through the body in a steady pulse. The tides rise and fall. Flowers open at dawn and close at dusk. And the breath, our breath, is part of this. We are not separate from these rhythms. We are woven into them. Every inhale is a small act of receiving. Every exhale is a small act of releasing. We have been practicing letting go since the moment we were born. We simply do not realize it. This is what the young man on the mountain began to understand that morning. He understood it as something felt in the body before the mind could turn it into an idea. The breath was the thing itself. The ordinary, overlooked, constant companion that had been with him every moment of his life, asking nothing, offering everything. The Buddha said, "Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Not because there is always something to smile about, but because the breath itself, when we feel it, brings a kind of quiet gladness. The gladness of being here. The gladness of being alive. The gladness of not needing to be anywhere else. That is the breath inside the breath. Simply the life that is already moving through us, if we stop long enough to feel it." When the teacher and the young man finally walked back down the mountain, the monastery bell was ringing for the midday meal. The young man could smell rice cooking and hear the quiet footsteps of monks crossing the courtyard. The teacher stopped at the garden gate and turned to him. "So," he said, "still think it is too simple?" The young man smiled. "No," he said, "I think it might be the hardest simple thing I have ever tried." "Good," said the teacher. "Then you are ready to begin." Let us rest here for a moment. Feel the breath, wherever it is right now, moving gently through the body. There is no need to change it. Just notice it, the way you might notice the sound of rain without needing to do anything about it. And when you are ready, we will continue. There is a paradox at the heart of the Buddhist path. The harder we chase peace, the faster it moves away from us. The more tightly we grip understanding, the more it slips through our fingers. The Zen masters noticed this centuries ago, and they found it both humbling and, in its own way, funny. We cannot force ourselves to be calm. We cannot will ourselves into wisdom. These things come on their own, in their own time, and almost always in the moment we stop reaching for them. There is no better example of this than the story of Ananda, the Buddha's closest companion. It is one of the most tender stories in all of Buddhist tradition. Ananda served as the Buddha's personal attendant for 25 years. He was devoted, kind, and tireless. He arranged meetings, welcomed visitors, carried messages, and cared for the Buddha in his daily life with quiet, faithful attention. He was always nearby, always listening. And because he was always listening, he heard every teaching the Buddha ever gave. Every discourse, every dialogue, every story told to monks and nuns and lay people who came from across the land to learn. Ananda had a remarkable memory. He could recall entire teachings word for word, years after they were spoken. Everything the Buddha said passed through Ananda's ears and stayed. He was, in many ways, the keeper of the whole tradition. Without him, much of what the Buddha taught might have been lost. And yet, for all his devotion, for all his years of service, for all the thousands of teachings he had heard and remembered, Ananda had not awakened. He had not experienced the deep understanding that the Buddha spoke of so often. He was close to it, everyone said. He was so nearly there. But nearly is not the same as arrived. This was not because Ananda lacked sincerity or effort. It was, perhaps, because he had too much of both. He was so busy serving, so busy listening to every word, so busy caring for others, that he had never quite turned that attention inward. He was like someone who had memorized every book about swimming, but had never stepped into the water. He knew this about himself, and it troubled him gently, like a small stone in the shoe on a long walk. always present. The other monks noticed it too. They would sometimes discuss it among themselves with fondness and puzzlement. How can Ananda, of all people, not see it? They would ask. He has been closer to the teaching than any of us. But perhaps that was exactly the problem. Ananda had been so close to the teaching that he had forgotten to let it close to him. He had been holding it at arm's length, studying it, memorizing it, admiring it, like someone who carries a lantern through the dark but never thinks to turn it around and let the light fall on his own face. The Buddha himself, in his final days, had spoken to Ananda about this with great warmth. "You have done so much," he said. "You have served with love and patience. Do not worry. Just a little more stillness, a little more turning inward, and everything will open for you. I am certain of it." These words were a comfort, but they were also a weight, because now the one person who believed in him most was no longer here to say them again. When the Buddha's long life of teaching came to its natural end, the community gathered to honor his memory and preserve his words. A great council was planned. Hundreds of those who had awakened would come together to recite the teachings aloud, to make sure they were remembered accurately and passed on faithfully to future generations. Ananda was essential to this gathering. He was the living library. He alone knew all the teachings from beginning to end. Without him, the council could not do its work. But there was a tradition. Only those who had fully awakened could attend the council. And Ananda had not. The other monks encouraged him gently. "You have heard everything. You have served faithfully. Surely it will come. Just sit. Just be with it. It will come." And so Ananda sat. He sat through the afternoon and into the evening. He sat through the night. He brought everything he knew to his practice. Every technique, every teaching, every instruction he had heard the Buddha give over 25 years. He tried to focus his mind with great precision. He tried to let go. He tried to be still. He tried to not try. Nothing happened. The hours passed. Midnight came and went. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The monastery was silent around him. A dog barked somewhere far off. An owl called from the trees beyond the wall. And Ananda sat, earnest and determined, his mind working and working, searching for the door he knew must be there somewhere. He tried concentrating on his breathing. His mind settled for a moment, then scattered again. He tried watching his thoughts, letting them come and go. They came, but they did not go. They circled and returned and brought more thoughts with them. He tried sitting with his feelings, the anxiety, the longing, the quiet frustration. They sat with him, solid and stubborn, and showing no signs of leaving. He was doing everything right. Every technique, every approach. And precisely because he was doing everything right, with such effort and such urgency, nothing was happening. The trying itself had become the obstacle. Like a man running toward his own shadow, always arriving at the place where it just was. But he could not see this yet. He would need to stop running first. It was sometime in the small hours before dawn. The council would begin with the morning light. And Ananda, sitting on his mat in the quiet dark, realized something very simple. He was exhausted, and he was no closer than he had been when he started. Something in him softened. The striving, the effort, the earnest determination, it all loosened. Like a fist that has been clenched for so long that the fingers have forgotten what it feels like to be open. Like the moment at the end of a long day when you finally set down the bundle you have been carrying and feel, for the first time, how heavy it was. Perhaps this is not something I can make happen, he thought. Perhaps it never was. And with that thought, quietly, without drama, he decided to rest. He decided to simply lie down, to let go of the whole endeavor, just for now, just for this moment, and allow his tired body to settle. He began to lower himself toward the pillow. And in that space, in that gentle transition between sitting and lying down, between effort and surrender, before his head touched the pillow, something opened. It was not a dramatic flash. It was not lightning or thunder or a great vision. It was more like a door swinging open that had never actually been locked. It was the quiet recognition that what he had been searching for had been here the whole time. In the searching itself, he had been looking past it. In the effort, he had been stepping over it. The moment he stopped reaching, it was simply there, clear and obvious and gentle, like the ground beneath his feet, like the air around his body. Ananda was awake. He sat for a while in the dark, breathing. The monastery was still quiet. The first birds had not yet begun to sing. He could feel the cool air on his skin, the hard mat beneath him, the faint ache in his knees from hours of sitting. Everything was the same as it had been 5 minutes ago. And everything was completely different. He thought of all the teachings he had memorized, the thousands of discourses, the careful instructions about impermanence and suffering, and the nature of the self. He had known them all by heart. He could recite any of them flawlessly. But knowing them and understanding them were, he now realized, as different as reading about fire and feeling its warmth. What had changed? He could not quite say. Something had dropped away. Some layer of effort, some film of trying, some invisible barrier between himself and his own experience. And without it, everything was clear, simple, obvious, like waking from a dream and realizing that the room had been lit the whole time. He thought of the Buddha's words to him in those final days. Just a little more turning inward, and everything will open for you. And he smiled, because what the Buddha had meant was not more effort. It was less. Just a little less holding, a little less reaching. And the door had swung open on its own. He arrived at the council the next morning, calm and clear-eyed, and he began to recite the teachings. Every discourse began with the same words, "Thus have I heard." And because of Ananda, and because of that quiet moment before dawn, the teachings of the Buddha have been carried forward through the centuries, all the way to this evening, all the way to these words. There is a Zen saying, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. This is what Ananda discovered in that moment before dawn. That awakening, understanding, peace, these are not things we build. They are what remains when we stop building. They are what appears when the effort falls away and we simply allow ourselves to be. This is familiar to anyone who has ever tried to remember a forgotten word. You search and search. The word is right there on the tip of your tongue, and the harder you reach for it, the further it retreats. And then you give up. You move on to something else. And 5 minutes later, with no effort at all, the word arrives. It was there the whole time. The searching was the thing blocking it. There is another story from a Zen monastery that explores this same truth from a different angle. A student had been given a teaching about letting go. Her teacher asked her to demonstrate her understanding. She thought about it carefully, and the next day she came to the teacher and said, "I have let go of my attachment to comfort." She sat perfectly still on a hard stone floor for an hour without moving. The teacher watched her, then gently shook his head. "That is endurance," he said. "It is admirable, but it is not letting go." She went away and thought some more. She came back the next day and said, "I have let go of my need to be right." She bowed to another student she had been arguing with and conceded the point. The teacher considered this. "That is humility," he said, "and it is beautiful, but it is not quite letting go either." She tried again. She gave away her favorite robe. "I have let go of attachment to possessions," she said. "That is generosity," said the teacher. "Wonderful, but still not quite." The student tried silence. She tried sitting in meditation for an entire day without moving. She tried serving the other monks without being asked. Each time, the teacher acknowledged the sincerity of her effort, and each time he said, gently, "Not quite." "Then what is it?" she asked one evening, her frustration beginning to show. "What am I missing?" "I cannot tell you," said the teacher, "because the moment I tell you, you will turn it into another thing to try. And trying is exactly what is in the way." Weeks passed. The student grew quieter. The urgency to prove herself began to dissolve, slowly, the way frost dissolves from a window in the morning sun. She stopped visiting the teacher with demonstrations. She stopped thinking about the question. One afternoon, she was sitting in the monastery garden. The plum trees had begun to bloom. Petals were falling slowly through the still air, landing on the stones, on her shoulders, on the surface of the small pond. She was not meditating. She was not trying to do anything at all. She was simply sitting, watching the petals fall. The teacher happened to walk past the garden. He stopped and looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "There," he said quietly. The student looked up. "There what?" "That," said the teacher. "What you are doing right now. That is letting go." She looked around. She was not doing anything. She was just sitting in the garden, breathing, watching petals fall. And then she understood. Letting go was never something to perform. It was never a demonstration or an achievement. It was simply this: being here, without agenda, without effort, without anywhere else to be. She laughed softly. "I have been trying to let go of trying," she said. "Yes," said the teacher, "and now you have stopped that too." There is something in these stories that speaks directly to the moments when peace feels far away, when the mind is busy, when the body is restless, when the effort to calm down becomes its own kind of tension. The Buddhist teaching here is clear, and it is kind. You cannot force this. You do not need to. The breath breathes itself. The heart beats itself. Calm comes on its own, and so does understanding. Our work, if we can call it work, is simply to stop interfering, to stop gripping the reins and let the horse find its own way home. Ananda spent 25 years at the side of the greatest teacher in Buddhist history. He heard every word. He remembered everything. An awakening came to him in the moment he decided it was all right to rest. The student in the garden spent weeks performing acts of surrender. An understanding found her while she was doing absolutely nothing. Just sitting, just breathing, just watching petals fall. The Buddha himself said, "Let go, and you will find what you are holding." Stop holding. Open the hands and see what has been resting in the palms all along. There is a gentleness in this teaching that is easy to miss. It is saying, you have done enough. You have tried enough. You have worried enough. What you are looking for is not at the end of more effort. It is here, in this breath, in this moment of allowing the effort to rest. The Zen masters sometimes compared understanding to falling asleep. You cannot force yourself to sleep. Anyone who has lain awake trying knows this. Sleep comes when the trying stops, when the body relaxes and the mind releases its grip on the day. It arrives, on its own, softly, in the gap between holding on and letting go. Peace arrives the same way. Understanding arrives the same way. In the moment we stop chasing and simply allow ourselves to be. Let us pause here for a moment. Feel the breath as it moves through the body, gentle and unhurried. There is nowhere to arrive. There is only this. Rest in it. We will continue when you are ready. The Buddha once told his students that in life, we are struck by two arrows. The first arrow is the event itself. The pain, the difficulty, the unexpected trouble. This arrow, he said, we cannot always avoid. But the second arrow is the one we add ourselves. It is our reaction, our anger, our frustration, our argument with what has already happened. And this second arrow, he taught, often causes more suffering than the first. We know this. We know it because we have all lain awake at night, not because of what happened, but because of what we keep telling ourselves about what happened. The event is over, but the argument continues, in the dark, with no one else in the room. There is an old story about a man who learned to set down the second arrow. It has been told for more than 2,000 years in the monasteries and teaching halls of the East. It is a story about anger and peace and what we find when we finally look closely at the things that disturb us. And it begins, as many good stories do, on a river at dusk. Let us explore a story about a fisherman. He was not a wealthy man. He lived simply, in a small house near the water, and each day he went out in his wooden boat to cast his nets. He was good at his work, patient and steady. He knew the river well. He knew where the fish gathered in the cool mornings and where they rested in the heat of the day. He knew the currents, the shallows, the places where the reeds grew thick and the water ran deep. But he had one great difficulty. He had a temper. Small things would set him off. A neighbor's rooster crowing before dawn. A customer at the market who bargained too hard over the price of fish. Rain on a day he needed sun. He would feel the heat rise in his chest, quick and sharp, and before he could stop it, hard words would fly from his mouth. Words he often wished he could take back. His wife would say to him, gently, "Why do you let these small things steal your peace?" And he would shake his head. "I cannot help it. It is just the way I am." She would look at him with kind, steady eyes. "Is it?" she would say, and then she would go back to her work, leaving him with the question. One evening, after a long day on the water, the fisherman decided to stay out a little longer. The day's work was done. The nets were folded and stacked in the bottom of the boat. The catch was modest but enough. There was no reason to hurry home. The river was calm. The sun hung low over the far bank, turning the water to amber and copper. Beyond the river, the hills were soft with evening haze, and the trees along the bank stood perfectly still, their reflections so clear in the water that it was hard to tell which were real and which were not. A few birds called to each other from the reeds. The air was warm and heavy, the way it sometimes feels in late summer, when even the wind seems to lie down and rest. The fisherman tied his boat loosely to a willow branch near the bank. He leaned back against the worn wooden seat, folded his arms across his chest, and closed his eyes. For a few minutes, he simply breathed. The gentle lap of water against the hull, the creak of the rope where it met the branch, the slow, steady pull of the current beneath him. Somewhere far off, a temple bell rang, faint and clear. Then silence again. It was, perhaps, the most peaceful moment he had known in a very long time. And then he felt it. A bump. A solid knock against the side of his boat, hard enough to rock him sideways and send a splash of water over the edge. His eyes flew open. Another boat had drifted into his, striking the hull broadside. "Hey," he said sharply, sitting upright. "Watch where you are going." No answer came. The boat bumped him again, harder this time. More water sloshed over his feet, soaking the folded nets. Now his temper rose, fast and hot and familiar. He could feel it in his jaw, his fists, the tightness across his shoulders. "What is wrong with you?" He muttered into the fading light. "Move your boat." Nothing. Just the sound of the river. He grabbed the edge of the other vessel with both hands, ready to shove it away, ready to tell whoever was steering so carelessly exactly what he thought of them. He was already forming the words. And then he looked inside. The boat was empty. There was no one in it. No oars. No fisherman. No careless fool. It was just an old boat that had come loose from its mooring somewhere upstream and drifted down with the current. The river had carried it here. That was all. The fisherman sat there for a long moment, one hand still resting on the edge of the empty boat. And the anger that had been rising in him, hot and fast and certain, simply fell away. It did not fade slowly. It vanished. Like a fist opening. Like a held breath finally released. Because there was no one to be angry at. There was no careless fool. No one had aimed this boat at him. No one had intended to disturb his peace. The river had simply done what rivers do. Things drift. Things bump into other things. That is all. He sat back. The two boats rocked gently together in the current, bumping softly now, almost tenderly. Above him, the first stars were coming out, one by one, as if someone were lighting small lamps across a great dark ceiling. And in that silence, the fisherman began to laugh. Quietly, to himself. A soft laugh of recognition. "All this time," he said softly, "I have been fighting with empty boats." He stayed on the river a long while after that. He was not in any hurry. The stars came out fully, and the water turned dark and silver. When he finally untied his boat and rowed home, he felt lighter than he had in years. As if something heavy had been set down, and he could not quite remember what it was. His wife was sitting by the door when he came in. "You are late," she said. "Yes," he said. I was learning something. On the river, an empty boat bumped into me, he said, and I nearly started a war with it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled. She understood. There is a teaching hidden in this small story that the Buddhist and Zen traditions have pointed to again and again. Most of the boats that crash into our lives are empty. The person who cut ahead of us in the market was not thinking about us at all. The friend who forgot to call was not trying to cause pain. The rain that ruined our plans was not aimed at us. The unkind word from a stranger, the slow line, the broken promise. Most of it was just the current of life, carrying things downstream. No intention behind it. No malice. Just the river, doing what rivers do. But we do not see empty boats. We see enemies. We see carelessness. We see disrespect. We fill the empty boat with a person, give that person intentions, and then we fight those intentions. Sometimes all night long. The Buddha put it simply. He said that the event is one thing. Our reaction to it is another. And often, our reaction causes more pain than the event itself. Think of what it is like to lie awake, unable to sleep. The wakefulness is one thing, but the frustration about being awake, the worry about how tired we will be tomorrow, the irritation at ourselves for not being able to rest, that is the second arrow. That is the second boat, and there is no one inside it. Let us return to the fisherman. After that evening on the river, something changed in him. Not all at once. He still had his temper. He still felt the heat rise when things went wrong. But now, in that first flash of frustration, something would pause. A quiet voice inside him, almost like his wife's, would ask, "Is there really someone in the boat?" And more often than not, when he looked closely, the boat was empty. Weeks passed. The season turned from summer toward autumn. The mornings grew cool, and mist hung over the water until midday. One such morning, a younger fisherman came to find him at the riverbank. The younger man looked tired. His face was drawn, his eyes heavy, and he moved with the restless energy of someone who has not slept. "I need your help," the younger man said. "A merchant in the village promised to buy my catch at a good price. When I brought the fish, he offered half of what he had promised. Half. I have been angry about it since yesterday. I was awake all night." The older fisherman nodded slowly. He knew this feeling. He had lost many nights to it himself. "Sit with me," he said. He gestured to a flat stone near the water's edge. "Let me tell you something that happened to me. Right here, on this river." And he told the younger man the story of the empty boat. The younger fisherman listened without interrupting. When the story was finished, he sat quietly, looking out at the water. Then he frowned. "But the merchant is not an empty boat," he said. "He is a real person. He made a choice to cheat me." "Perhaps he did," said the older man. "And you can go to him tomorrow. You can speak plainly. You can tell him his offer was not fair. You can choose not to sell to him again. Those are wise things to do." He paused and let the river fill the silence for a moment. "But tell me, last night, while you were lying awake, did your anger change the price the merchant offered?" "No." "Did it undo what happened?" "No." "Did it help you in any way at all?" The younger man looked down at his hands. They were calloused and strong from years of pulling nets, but right now they were clenched. He opened them slowly. "No," he said. "It just kept me awake." "Then who did your anger serve?" A heron stood in the shallows nearby, still and patient, watching the water for movement. Neither man spoke for a while. "There is something I heard once from a traveling monk," the older fisherman said. "He said that holding anger too long is like picking up a coal from the fire with your bare hands. You may plan to throw it at someone, but while you stand there planning, you are the one getting burned." The younger man looked at his open palms as if he could almost feel the heat. "The merchant went home last night and slept well," the older fisherman said gently. "You are the one standing here, tired and hurting. The boat was empty, but you spent all night fighting with it." The morning light was on the water now, and the mist was beginning to lift. The river looked different than it had in the darkness of a sleepless night. Wider, calmer, less threatening. "So what do I do?" the younger man asked. "Tonight," said the fisherman, "when the thoughts come, when the argument starts again in your mind, just notice it. See the boat floating toward you, and then look inside it. If it is empty, let it drift past. You do not need to grab the edge. And if there really is someone in the boat?" The older fisherman smiled. "In all my years on this river," he said, "I have looked inside many, many boats. Almost every one of them was empty." The old Zen teachers took this teaching even further. They did not only say, "See that other boats are empty." They said something more surprising. They said, "Empty your own boat." What does this mean? It means that the reason we fight with passing boats is because our own boat is so full. Full of opinions about how things should be. Full of old arguments we never finished. Full of ideas about ourselves, about what we deserve, about how the world should treat us. We carry so much cargo that even the smallest bump feels like an attack. But when our boat is empty, when we have set down the cargo for a time, even a large collision is just a gentle rocking on the water. We feel the bump, and we rock with it, and we settle again. No fighting, no war. This is not about becoming passive. The fisherman still went to the merchant. He still spoke honestly. Emptying the boat does not mean we stop caring. It means we stop carrying. We stop carrying the argument into the night. We stop carrying yesterday's bump into today's water. We stop carrying the hurt into our sleep. The Buddha described a mind like this as being like the sky. Clouds pass through the sky. Storms pass through. Rain falls, wind blows. But the sky itself is never harmed. It does not fight the clouds or resist the rain. It holds everything, and it remains open. We have all known moments like this. Moments where, for no particular reason, the mind is quiet and the body is at ease, where we are not fighting anything, not wanting anything to be different, just here, just breathing. Those moments are not rare because they are hard to find. They are rare because we are so busy filling the boat. And this is where the breath meets the teaching. The breath is the body's way of emptying the boat. Each exhale is a small release, a natural letting go that happens again and again, all through the day and all through the night. The body already knows how to do this. It has been doing it since we were born. So tonight, if the mind begins to fill, if the old boats come drifting in with their familiar cargo of worry and frustration and plans for tomorrow, we can simply return to the exhale. Let the breath do what it already does. Releasing, making space. There is a saying in the Zen tradition, do not seek the truth. Only cease to cherish opinions. This is the spirit of the empty boat. Peace is already here. It is what remains when we stop adding noise. When we stop disturbing the water, it clears on its own. The fisherman did not gain anything new on the river that evening. He lost something. He lost the habit of reacting just for a moment. And in that loss, he found something he had not expected. Rest. It is always there, beneath the noise, beneath the second arrow, beneath the cargo, the still water under the drifting boats. It is here now. Let us pause here for a moment. Let the body be still. Let the breath come and go at its own pace. There is nowhere else to be. And when you are ready, we will continue together. The Buddha taught that 8 winds blow through every human life. Praise and blame, success and failure, pleasure and pain, gain and loss. Most people, he said, are tossed about by these winds like leaves in a storm, lifted by good fortune one moment and knocked down by difficulty the next. But now and then, someone learns to stand steady in the middle, rooted in a calm so deep that it holds regardless of which wind happens to be blowing. In the Zen tradition, this steadiness has a name. It is called equanimity. And there is a story about a monk who lived it so completely that it has been told and retold for hundreds of years, because people cannot quite believe it. There was a Zen monk who lived in a small village at the foot of a mountain range. He had been there for many years. His home was a modest hut at the edge of the village, near where the forest began. He grew vegetables in a small garden. He mended his own clothes. In the mornings, he sat quietly in meditation. In the afternoons, he was often seen walking the paths between the village and the hills, unhurried, stopping sometimes to speak with the farmers or the children who played along the road. The villagers respected him. He was known for his kindness and his simplicity. When someone was unwell, he would visit them and sit with them. When there was a disagreement between neighbors, he would listen to both sides without taking one. He did not preach or lecture. He simply lived quietly, and his quiet way of living seemed to put people at ease. He had a good reputation, and a reputation is a fragile thing. In the village, there lived a young woman whose family kept a small shop. One season, her parents discovered that she was expecting a child. They were worried and confused. They pressed her again and again to tell them who the father was. The young woman was frightened. The real father was a young man from a neighboring village, someone she cared for but was afraid to name, because she knew her parents would not approve. And so, in her fear, she said the first name that came to her, a name she thought would cause the least trouble, because the person was known to be gentle and would not fight back. She named the monk. Her parents did not know what to feel. Disappointment, confusion, a sense of betrayal. This man they had trusted, had respected all these years. They walked together to the edge of the village, to the monk's small hut. When he came to the door, they told him what their daughter had said. The monk looked at them. He could see the pain in their faces. He could hear the confusion in their voices. He did not protest. He did not argue. He did not explain that it was not true. He simply said, "Is that so?" 3 words, spoken gently, without defense, without anger, without blame. The parents did not know what to make of this. They had expected denial or explanation. Instead, they received only stillness. They left, uncertain of everything. When the child was born, the parents brought him to the monk. "He is your responsibility," they said. Their faces were tight, with a mixture of hurt and resolve. They placed the baby in his arms and turned back toward the village. The monk looked down at the child. Small, warm, blinking up at him with new eyes. Whatever the truth of how this child came to be here, the child was here now. That was what was real. That was what mattered. "Is that so?" he said softly, to no one in particular. And then he set about learning how to care for a baby. He was not prepared for this. He was a monk who lived alone, whose days were made up of silence and meditation and gardening. He did not know how to warm milk or soothe a crying infant in the small hours of the night. But he learned. He asked a woman in a nearby village to help him with milk. He fashioned a small crib from a wooden crate and lined it with soft cloth. He carried the baby with him when he walked, tucked carefully against his chest. The villagers, of course, talked. His reputation, which had been so steady and respected, crumbled. People who had once greeted him warmly now turned away. People who had once come to him for counsel no longer visited. He was no longer the wise monk at the edge of the village. He was something else now in their eyes. And through all of it, the monk's manner did not change. He still rose before dawn. He still sat quietly. He still tended his garden, though now with a baby sleeping in a basket beside the vegetable rows. He still walked the paths in the afternoon, though now with a small child in his arms instead of nothing at all. If someone looked at him with disapproval, he met their gaze gently. If someone spoke to him with coldness, he responded with warmth. He did not defend himself. He did not go from house to house explaining that it was not true. He simply lived, as he had always lived, with one addition: a child who needed caring for. And something interesting happened, quietly, in the privacy of that small hut. The monk, who had spent decades in stillness and solitude, discovered that caring for a child was its own kind of practice. The midnight feedings, the patience required when the baby would not settle, the way a small life demanded that he be present, completely present, not in some future moment, but right here, right now. In Zen, they speak of bringing full attention to ordinary tasks. Washing the bowl, sweeping the path. The monk found that changing a cloth, warming milk, and holding a restless child against his chest in the dark hours before dawn asked for the same quality of attention, perhaps even more. He did not speak of this to anyone, but those who paid close attention might have noticed something. The monk, despite everything, did not seem diminished. If anything, he seemed more at ease than he had before. Seasons passed. The baby grew. He learned to sit up, then to crawl, then to stand and take his first unsteady steps across the floor of the small hut. The monk watched all of this with quiet attention, the way he watched everything, with the same calm presence he brought to his meditation, to his garden, to the changing of the seasons. One afternoon, a neighbor who had been one of the few to remain friendly came to visit. She brought rice cakes and sat on the step outside the hut while the child played in the dirt nearby, carefully stacking small stones. "I have wanted to ask you something for a long time," the neighbor said. Please, said the monk. How do you bear it? The things people say about you, the looks, the way they have turned away from you. Does it not hurt? The monk considered the question. There was a time, he said, when I was younger, when the good opinion of others felt like solid ground beneath my feet. When people praised me, I felt tall. When they criticized me, I felt small. I lived on a kind of seesaw, always rising and falling depending on what someone else thought of me. And now? Now I try to stand on my own ground. The praise and the blame both come and go. They are like weather. Some days are warm, some days are cold, but the mountain does not change with the weather. The neighbor looked at the child, who was now trying to balance a fourth stone on top of three and frowning in concentration. But this, she said, this was not just weather. This was a storm. Yes, the monk said. It was a storm, and I am still here. And so is he. He nodded toward the child. And tomorrow the sky may be different. The Buddha taught that praise and blame are two of the 8 winds, he continued. They blow through every life. If we can learn to feel them without being carried away by them, we find a kind of peace that does not depend on fair weather. A warm peace. A steady one. The neighbor thought about this. I think most of us would have fought back, she said. Defended ourselves. Made sure everyone knew the truth. Perhaps, said the monk, and perhaps the truth would have come out, and perhaps it would not. But in the fighting I would have lost something more important than my reputation. What? My peace. He watched the child for a moment, who had given up on the stones and was now poking a stick into the soft earth, drawing shapes that only he understood. There is an old Buddhist teaching, the monk said. It says that we suffer not because of what happens to us, but because we insist that what happens should be different. We grip the world and say, not this, something else, something better. And the gripping is the suffering. When I stopped gripping my reputation, when I stopped needing people to see me a certain way, the suffering left. Not the situation. The situation was the same. But the suffering, that was mine to release. The neighbor was quiet for a time. Then she said, You make it sound easy. It is not easy, he said. It is simple. Those are different things. The truth did come out. It always does, when given time. The young woman had carried the weight of her untruth for many months. It sat with her in the mornings when she woke and in the evenings when she tried to sleep. It was heavier than she had imagined it would be. She had thought that naming the monk would be the end of her difficulty, but it was only the beginning of a different kind of difficulty. A quiet, persistent one that lived in her chest. One evening, she went to her parents. She sat down across from them and she told them the truth. The real father was the young man from the neighboring village. She had been afraid, and she had spoken the monk's name because she thought it would be simpler. She was sorry. Her parents sat with this for a long time. The weight of what they had done, the shame of how they had treated the monk, the months of coldness and judgment, all of it settled on them like a stone. The next morning, they walked to the edge of the village. The monk was in his garden, pulling weeds, while the child sat nearby eating a piece of fruit. They bowed deeply. "We have come to ask your forgiveness," the father said, his voice thick. "Our daughter has told us the truth. The child is not yours. We are deeply sorry for what we have put you through." The monk set down his gardening tool. He stood and looked at them with the same calm, kind expression he had worn on the day they first came to his door. There was no bitterness in his face, no satisfaction, no trace of "I told you so." He simply said, "Is that so?" Then he went inside, wrapped the child warmly, held him for a quiet moment, and placed him gently in the grandmother's arms. "Take good care of him," he said. And he watched them walk back toward the village, the child looking back over the grandmother's shoulder with wide, curious eyes. The monk stood in his doorway for a while after they had gone. Then he went back to his garden. This story has been told for centuries because it captures something that most of us find almost impossible to imagine, a peace so complete that it does not crack under pressure. And it raises a question. Was the monk indifferent? Did he simply not care what people thought, what happened to him, what was true or untrue? No, he cared. He cared for the child with tenderness and attention. He cared for the villagers even as they turned away from him. He cared about truth, but he did not need to be the one to force it into the open. He trusted that things would unfold as they needed to. This is the difference between equanimity and indifference. Indifference is a wall. It keeps everything out, the good and the bad alike. Equanimity is an open door. Everything is allowed in, but nothing is allowed to take up permanent residence and rearrange the furniture. The Buddhist teachings describe equanimity as a mind like a clear, deep lake. Stones may be thrown into it. Ripples will form, but the lake does not become the stone. The water settles, and the lake is clear again. It is not that the stone was not real. It is that the lake is deeper than the stone. This is what the monk had found. A way to hold difficulty without being broken by it. He held the false accusation. He held the loneliness. He held the child. And he held the letting go when it was time. All with the same steady hands. There is something in this that speaks to the nights when sleep will not come. Often, it is because we are holding something we cannot put down. An argument we keep rehearsing. A worry we keep turning over. A hurt we keep pressing on, like a bruise we cannot stop touching. The monk's quiet. "Is that so?" is not a magic phrase, but it carries a practice inside it. It is the practice of receiving what comes without immediately building a story around it. Without defending, without arguing, without adding a second layer of suffering to the first. Something happened today that was difficult. Is that so? Someone said something that stung. Is that so? Tomorrow holds something uncertain. Is that so? Receiving it gently, fully, and letting the lake settle. This is what the Buddhist tradition means by equanimity. It includes all feeling. The monk felt the loneliness. He felt the weight of caring for a child alone. He felt, surely, a pang when he placed that child back in the grandmother's arms. Equanimity asks us to feel everything, fully, while staying rooted. To stand in the river without being carried downstream. And it begins with something very small. A breath, a pause before reacting, a moment of space between what happens and what we do about it. In that space, there is a choice. And the choice, more often than not, is simply, let it be. Let it settle. Let it pass. The Buddha said, in the end, only 3 things matter. how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The monk let go of his reputation. He let go of the need to be right. He let go of the child he had grown to love. And in each letting go, he remained whole, because his peace was never built on any of those things. It was built on something quieter, something inside him that the 8 winds could not reach. That same quiet place exists in all of us. It is here, right now, beneath the noise, beneath the worry, steady and still, like the deep water beneath the ripples. Let us pause here. Let the body settle. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to push away. Just this breath, and the next one, and the stillness between them. Whenever you are ready, we will continue. We have all felt it, the quiet restlessness that whispers, if only things were different, if only I had more, or were further along, or lived a different life. The Buddha gave a name to this feeling. He called it thirst, and he taught that this thirst, this endless reaching for something other than what is, sits at the root of nearly all our unease. It is a thirst that cannot be quenched by getting what we want, because the moment we get it, the thirst simply moves to the next thing, and the next, and the next. Like drinking salt water, the more we drink, the thirstier we become. Let us explore a story about a stonecutter. He lived in a small village at the base of a great mountain. Each morning, he walked to the mountainside with his hammer and chisel, and he cut stone. He cut slabs for floors and walls and garden paths. He knew the grain of the rock, the way different stones split along different lines, which ones held up in rain and which crumbled. He was skilled at his work, and his hands were strong. For a long time he was content. His life was simple. He had enough to eat, a roof over his head, and work that kept his body moving and his mind steady. He did not ask for more. But contentment, when it is not rooted deeply, can be loosened by a single gust of wind. One day, the stonecutter was called to deliver a large slab to the home of a wealthy merchant in the town below. He carried the stone on his back down the mountain path, through the market, and to a gate that opened onto a courtyard larger than his entire house. Inside, he saw silk curtains in the windows, carved furniture, servants carrying trays of food, and guests arriving in fine clothes. He set the stone down and stood for a moment, looking. How powerful that man must be, he said quietly to himself. To live like this. If only I could live like this. Now, in this mountain, there lived a spirit. Some said the spirit was the mountain itself, old and patient and watching. The spirit heard the stonecutter's wish, and it granted it. The stonecutter became the merchant. And for a time, he was pleased. He had the silk curtains, the carved furniture, the servants, the food. He had everything the merchant had, and more. People came to his gate and bowed. His name was known in the markets and trading houses. He slept on soft bedding and woke to the sound of a bell rung by a servant rather than to the ache in his own hands. But he noticed something strange. The pleasure of each new thing faded quickly. The silk curtains became ordinary within a week. The fine food, which had seemed miraculous at first, became simply what he ate. And in the quieter moments, sitting alone in his large courtyard, he felt a familiar stirring, a restlessness, a feeling that something was still missing. One afternoon, sitting in that courtyard, he heard the sound of drums and gongs in the street. A procession was passing. A high official, carried in an elegant chair by 4 attendants, with soldiers walking alongside. Everyone in the street stepped aside. Everyone bowed. Even the merchant, even he, had to bow. How powerful that official must be, the stonecutter thought. Everyone bows to him. Even I must bow. If only I had that kind of authority. The spirit of the mountain heard, and the stonecutter became the official. Now he was carried through the streets, and others bowed to him. He made decisions that shaped the province. His word was law in the villages under his care. He wore robes of dark blue silk and ate from porcelain bowls. But summer came, and with it, a heat so fierce that the official could not escape it. No parasol helped. No fan brought relief. His fine robes clung to his skin. He looked up at the sun, blazing white in the sky, indifferent to everything below it. The sun is more powerful than any official, he thought. It answers to no one. If only I were the sun. The spirit heard, and the stonecutter became the sun. He blazed across the sky. He warmed the fields and ripened the fruit. He scorched the earth when he chose, and softened the snow on the peaks when he turned his face away. He was immense, radiant, untouchable, until a cloud drifted between him and the earth. A single cloud, soft and grey, and it blocked his light completely. The great sun and a wisp of water vapor was enough to dim him. The cloud is stronger than the sun, he thought. If only I were a cloud. The spirit heard, and the stonecutter became the cloud. He gathered rain and released it over the valleys. He flooded the rivers and turned the roads to mud. He darkened the sky for days. He felt enormous and unstoppable, until the wind came, a steady, powerful wind that tore him apart and scattered him across the horizon. He could not hold his shape. He could not resist. The wind is the most powerful of all, he thought. If only I were the wind. The spirit heard, and the stonecutter became the wind. He swept across plains and through mountain passes. He bent the trees and pushed the waves into white peaks. He howled through valleys and rattled the shutters of every house he found. But then he met the mountain. His mountain. The great stone face where he had once worked with his hammer. He blew against it with all his force. He threw rain and dust and debris at its slopes. And the mountain did not move. It stood exactly where it had always stood, patient and calm, as if the wind were nothing more than a breeze. The mountain is stronger than the wind, the stonecutter thought. Stronger than anything. If only I were the mountain. The spirit heard one last time, and the stonecutter became the mountain. And he was vast. He was solid. He was ancient and unmovable. The sun passed overhead each day, warm and distant, and he felt nothing. The rain came and ran down his sides in streams, and he felt nothing. The wind pressed against him with everything it had, and he stood firm. Seasons passed over him like breaths. Snow fell on his peaks and melted in spring. Trees grew on his slopes, small and persistent, their roots finding cracks in the stone. He stood above the world, steady and permanent, and he thought, at last, I have found real power. At last, I can rest. For a while, this was true. The mountain felt like the end of the search. Nothing could touch him. Nothing could move him. He was beyond the reach of desire. But stillness, when it has no awareness in it, becomes its own kind of prison. The mountain could not feel the warmth of the sun. It could not taste the rain. It could not hear the birds that nested in its trees or see the wildflowers that bloomed on its slopes each spring. It had power, yes, but it had traded everything else for it. And then he heard something, a small sound, a tapping, steady and patient, coming from far below. He looked down, far below, and there at his base, he saw a figure, a man with a hammer and a chisel, cutting stone from the mountainside, shaping it piece by piece with skill and patience, changing the mountain with nothing but his hands and his tools. And the stonecutter understood. He had traveled through every form of power he could imagine. Wealth, authority, the forces of nature itself. And at the end of the journey, he found himself back where he had started, looking down at a man with a chisel, a man exactly like the one he had been. The spirit of the mountain spoke to him then, for the first and only time. "You have been everything," the spirit said, "and everything has fallen short. Do you see now?" "I see," said the stonecutter. "What do you see?" "That I was looking for something I already had." "Yes," said the spirit. "Every form you took was powerful in its own way, and every form had something above it." The merchant bows to the official. The official is helpless before the sun. The sun is blocked by the cloud. The cloud is torn by the wind. The wind cannot move the mountain, and the mountain is shaped by the stonecutter. There is no top of the ladder. There is only the ladder and the climbing and the exhaustion of climbing. And the way off the ladder? "You are standing on it now," said the spirit. "You always were." And with that, the stonecutter was himself again, standing at the base of the mountain, hammer in hand, chisel in the other, the morning sun warm on his back, the stone in front of him, familiar and patient. And for the first time, he felt no wish to be anywhere else. This story has been told in many ways, across many centuries. And each time it is told, it arrives at the same quiet truth. The restlessness we carry, the feeling that we are not quite where we should be, that peace is somewhere else, in some other life, some other version of ourselves. This is one of the most universal experiences of being human. The Buddha recognized it as the central problem. He said that there is suffering and that it arises from this thirst, this reaching, this constant leaning forward into the next moment, the next desire, the next version of who we think we should become. And the stonecutter's story shows us exactly how it works. Each new form brought a brief satisfaction, followed by the same restlessness. The merchant's silk lost its luster within days. The official's power revealed its limits the moment the sun shone. Each step up the ladder only revealed another rung above. The thirst was never quenched, because each new drink was salt water. It satisfied for a moment, and then left a deeper thirst behind. The cure the Buddha offered was surprisingly gentle. He said, "Notice the thirst. See it clearly. Understand its nature. And in understanding it, begin to realize that what we are searching for is often already beneath our feet." The stonecutter's power was always in his hands. It was in the steady rhythm of his work, the knowledge of the stone, the simplicity of his days. He could not see it because he was too busy looking at what others had. There is a teaching in Zen that goes like this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It sounds almost like a joke. You do all this seeking, all this striving, and you end up right back where you started. Yes, but you see it differently. The wood is the same wood. The water is the same water. But you are no longer wishing you were somewhere else while you carry it. A Zen teacher was once asked by a student, "What is the secret to happiness?" The teacher said, "Pay attention." That is all? When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. When you sit, sit. Give yourself completely to what is in front of you. This is the whole of the teaching. The student frowned. "But I already do those things." "You eat," said the teacher, "but while you eat, you are thinking about your work. You walk, but while you walk, you are planning tomorrow. You sit, but while you sit, you are wishing you were standing. You are always one step ahead of your own life, and so you miss it. But there is always so much to think about, so many things to plan and worry over. Of course there are, and you can attend to them at the proper time. But right now, there is only this conversation, this tea, this afternoon. If you cannot be here for this, you will not be able to be here for anything. And a life spent always somewhere else is a life half-lived." The student was quiet for a while. Then he said, "How do I stop doing that?" "You have already stopped," said the teacher. "Just now, for a moment, you were here. You were listening. You were not anywhere else. That is enough. Start there." The stonecutter's journey was a circle. He left home and traveled through every kind of power and came back to the same place. But the place had changed because he had changed. He could see, finally, what had been there all along. This is one of the most beautiful things about the Buddhist path. It does not promise some distant reward at the end of a long road. It says, peace is where you are. You have just been too busy searching for it elsewhere to notice. The Zen masters called this returning to the marketplace with open hands. After all the seeking, all the climbing, you come back to ordinary life. But now your hands are open. Now you can feel the texture of what you are holding. Now you can be here for it. The breath teaches this too, in its own quiet way. Each breath is complete in itself. A short breath does not wish to be longer. A shallow breath does not strain to be deeper. The breath simply comes and goes, and each one is whole, and each one is enough. There is a freedom in this. The freedom of being exactly where we are, without needing to become anything else. The stonecutter found it when he stopped reaching. The Zen student found it when he stopped planning. It is available in any moment when the restlessness quiets, even for a breath, and we see that this, right here, is already whole. The Buddha said, enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. The stonecutter spent a lifetime searching for power and found it in his own two hands. The merchant, the official, the sun, the cloud, the wind, the mountain, they were all just the long way home. The short way home was always the same. Set down the chisel, look around, breathe, and see that this ordinary moment, this ordinary life, has always been enough. Let us rest here for a moment. Feel whatever is present right now. The weight of the body, the movement of the breath. There is nothing to add and nothing to take away. When you are ready, we will continue. The Zen tradition has always been curious about a simple question. If our difficult feelings are truly part of who we are, why can we never find them when we look directly at them? Anger feels so solid in the chest. Worry feels so permanent at 3 in the morning. Sadness feels like it will last forever. And yet, when we turn to face these feelings, really look at them, they shift. They soften. Sometimes they vanish entirely, like mist when the sun reaches it. Let us explore a story about a woman who came to see a Zen teacher at a monastery in the hills. She had traveled for several days. When she arrived, she was tired and she was troubled. The teacher received her in a small room with a single window that looked out onto a bamboo grove. He offered her tea, and they sat together while she gathered her thoughts. "I need your help," she said. "I am consumed by anger. It has been with me for years. It poisons my relationships. It keeps me awake at night. I feel it in my body, in my chest and my throat, and I cannot get rid of it. I have tried everything. I have tried to reason with it, to talk myself out of it, to push it down. Nothing works. Please, help me." The teacher listened to all of this with full attention. He did not interrupt. When she was finished, he set down his tea and looked at her calmly. "This anger," he said, "I would like to see it. Show it to me." The woman was taken aback. "I cannot show it to you right now. It is not here at this moment. Where does it go when it is not here?" She opened her mouth to answer, then paused. She had never thought about this. The anger felt so permanent, so much a part of her, that she had assumed it was always present. But when she looked for it right now, sitting in this quiet room with the bamboo moving gently outside the window, she could not find it. "I do not know where it goes," she said. "And when it comes, where does it come from? I do not know that either. It just arises. Something triggers it, and suddenly it is there." The teacher nodded. "So it comes and goes. It arises and it passes. Sometimes it is here, and sometimes it is not. Is that right?" "Yes." "Then it cannot be your true nature," the teacher said. "If anger were who you truly are, it would be here all the time. You could show it to me whenever I asked. But you cannot, because it visits you. It is a guest. Sometimes a loud and difficult guest, yes, but a guest all the same. And guests, by their nature, leave." The woman sat with this. The bamboo outside moved in a slow breeze. The tea cooled in her hands. "You have been treating your anger as if it were the owner of the house," the teacher continued. "As if it had the right to stay forever and rearrange everything. But it does not own the house. You do. The anger comes, and you can notice it, and you can even bow to it. You can say, 'I see you,' but you do not have to hand it the keys." The woman felt something release in her chest, a loosening. She did not feel that her anger was gone. She still knew it would return, but something had shifted in how she understood it. It was a visitor. It always had been. "For so long," she said, "I thought there was something wrong with me. that I was an angry person. That anger was who I am. This is a very common mistake, the teacher said. We take a passing feeling and build an identity around it. I am an angry person. I am an anxious person. I am a sad person. But you are not any of these things. You are the one who notices them. You are the space in which they come and go. The room is not the furniture. The furniture changes. The room remains. She considered this. Outside, a bird landed in the bamboo and then flew away again. The branch swayed for a moment, then was still. The Buddha taught this clearly, the teacher added. He said that all feelings arise and pass away. All of them. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, everything in between. They are like clouds moving across the sky. The sky is never damaged by the clouds, no matter how dark they become. And the clouds always move on. There is another story from a different monastery that arrives at the same place by a different path. Let us explore a story about a young monk who was afraid of the well. It was an old well, built of stone, in the center of the temple courtyard. During the day, it was ordinary enough. Monks drew water from it for cooking and washing. But at night, the young monk was certain he saw something in the water when he leaned over the edge. A face, a shape, something watching him from below. He became convinced the well was haunted. He stopped drawing water after dark. He avoided the courtyard in the evenings. When the other monks asked why, he told them about the face in the water, the presence he felt. Some of them laughed gently. Others shrugged. One or two began to feel uneasy themselves. The young monk's fear, it seemed, was catching. Days passed, and the fear grew. What had started as a glimpse became a certainty. He was sure of what he had seen. He began to dread even the thought of the well, and at night he would lie on his mat and listen to the silence of the courtyard, imagining movements in the dark. Eventually, word reached the elder monk who oversaw the temple. She was a calm, practical woman who had lived in the monastery for many decades and had seen many young monks arrive with many varieties of fear. She came to find the young monk one evening after the last bell. "I hear you have found a ghost in our well," she said. "Yes," said the young monk. "I have seen it. A face, looking up at me from the water." "Show me," she said. They walked together across the courtyard. It was a clear night, and the moon was nearly full. The stones of the courtyard were pale in the moonlight. The well stood in the center, quiet and still. "Go on," she said. "Look, look." The young monk stepped up to the well, his heart quickening. He leaned over the edge and peered down into the dark water. There it was, the face, looking up at him with wide, anxious eyes. "I see it," he whispered. "It is there." The elder monk stepped beside him and looked down. Then she looked at the young monk, then back at the water, and she smiled. "That is your own reflection," she said gently. The young monk looked again. The moonlight fell across the water, and yes, there he was. His own face, rippled and distorted by his nervous breath on the surface. The ghost was him. It had always been him. "The ghost was your own unsettled mind," the elder said. "You were so afraid of what you might find that you created exactly the thing you feared. This is what the mind does. It projects its own shadows onto the world, and then it runs from them. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Draw the water," she said. "It is just water." He lowered the bucket. The rope creaked. The water splashed gently as the bucket filled. He pulled it up, and it was ordinary, clear, cool water. The kind he had drawn 1,000 times before. In the Zen tradition, the elder said as they walked back across the courtyard, we say that most of the monsters we fight are ones we have made ourselves. When the mind is still, when the water is calm, there are no ghosts. Only our own face looking back at us. And there is nothing to fear in that. Both of these stories point to something the Buddhist teachings return to again and again. Our thoughts and emotions feel so real, so solid, so much like facts about the world. But when we look at them directly, they turn out to be something else. They are movements. They arise, they stay for a while, and they pass. Like weather, like waves, like the sounds of the night that seem frightening until we see what made them. The Buddha described the mind as a great open space in which experiences arise and dissolve moment after moment. Thoughts float through. Feelings bloom and fade. Memories surface and sink again. And through all of it, the awareness that watches remains clear and undisturbed, like a mirror that reflects everything but holds nothing. This is something we can notice right now. Whatever we are feeling in this moment, pleasant or restless or somewhere in between, it is already changing, already shifting. By the time we name it, it has become something slightly different. The mind is always in motion, and that motion is its nature. Let us explore one more story. This one is about patience. In a Buddhist monastery, there was a teacher who liked to explain meditation using a simple image. He would say, "Training the mind is like training a young dog." One spring, a new student arrived at the monastery. He was sincere and eager but frustrated with himself. He had been sitting in meditation each morning, and his mind refused to cooperate. It wandered constantly. One breath, perhaps two, and then he was gone. Lost in thought, in memory, in plans. 10 minutes would pass before he realized he had forgotten the breath entirely. "I am terrible at this," the student said one afternoon, sitting with the teacher in the monastery garden. "My mind goes everywhere. I cannot make it stay." "Good," said the teacher. "Good?" "Yes. You notice that your mind wandered. That noticing is the practice. Every time you see that the mind has gone somewhere else, and you gently bring it back, that is a moment of waking up. That is the practice working. But I only stay with the breath for a moment or two before it happens again." The teacher pointed to the edge of the garden, where a young dog was lying in the shade of a plum tree. As they watched, the dog stood up, trotted to the garden wall, sniffed something interesting, then wandered toward the kitchen, then circled back to the tree, then got up again and walked toward the gate. "Watch him," said the teacher. "That is your mind." The student laughed softly. "Now, if you wanted to train that dog to sit in one place, how would you do it?" "I would call him back," said the student. "Each time he wandered, I would call him back." "Would you hit him?" "No." "Would you scold him?" "No. He is just doing what dogs do." "Exactly," said the teacher. and your mind is just doing what minds do. It wanders. That is its nature. You do not need to punish it. You do not need to be frustrated with it. You simply call it back, gently, again and again. Stay, come back. Stay, come back. That is the whole of the practice. But it feels like I am making no progress. The teacher smiled. When you began, you noticed your mind had wandered after 10 minutes. Now you notice after 2 breaths. That is enormous progress. You just cannot see it because you are measuring the wrong thing. You are measuring how long the mind stays. You should be measuring how quickly you notice it has gone. That noticing is awareness, and it is growing in you, whether you feel it or not. The student looked at the dog, who had settled back under the plum tree and was now dozing peacefully. Even the dog rests eventually, the teacher said. Be patient. You are doing better than you think. How long does it take? The student asked. Before the mind begins to settle. It is already settling, said the teacher. Each time you notice, each time you return, the space between the wandering grows a little longer. You may not see it day to day, just as you do not see a tree growing. But if you came back a year from now and sat on this bench, you would see how much the tree has changed. The mind is the same. Trust the process. Tend it gently and let it grow. There is a kindness at the heart of the Buddhist approach to the mind. It does not treat our wandering thoughts as failures. It does not treat our difficult emotions as enemies to be conquered. The Buddha compared the mind to a wild horse and the practice to a patient rider. You do not break the horse. You befriend it. You earn its trust, slowly, over time. And one day, it carries you willingly. This gentleness extends to everything. The anger that visits us is met with awareness, and it softens. The fears we project onto the world dissolve when we look at them clearly. The restless mind that wanders away from the present moment is called back, kindly, 1,000 times, and each return is a small homecoming. A Zen teacher once wrote, "The practice of returning is itself the practice. Every departure is an opportunity to come home." The Buddhist teachings call this clear seeing, the gentle, honest willingness to look at what is actually happening rather than what we imagine is happening. It is always available. In any moment of worry or restlessness, we can pause and ask, is this really as solid as it feels? Is this truly who I am? Or is it passing through? Most of the time, it is passing through. Like wine through an open window. Like a cloud across the face of the moon. Here for a moment, and then gone, leaving the sky exactly as it was. That same steady sky is here now. That same clear space, present and open, beneath whatever may be moving through it. Let us pause here for a moment. Let everything settle, the stories, the thoughts, the questions they may have stirred. The breath continues on its own, steady and faithful. Rest in that. We will continue when you are ready. What happens when someone is truly, completely present? When there is no part of the mind wandering into the past or reaching toward the future? Something changes. The air around that person seems to settle. Their movements become graceful without effort. Their stillness becomes a kind of gravity that draws others in. The Zen tradition has long understood this. They even have a word for it, samadhi. It means total absorption, being so fully here that there is no room left for worry, for fear, for anything except this moment, exactly as it is. Let us explore a story about a tea master. He lived in a small town in the old world, and he had spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of tea. This was not simply the boiling of water and the steeping of leaves. In the Buddhist and Zen tradition, the preparation of tea was a form of meditation. Every gesture had meaning. The way the water was heated, the way the cup was held, the way the tea was poured in a slow, steady arc with the same attention one might give to a prayer. The tea master was known throughout the region for the beauty of his ceremonies. People came from great distances to sit in his small tea room and watch him work. They said that when he prepared tea, the room itself seemed to become quieter. That time slowed down. That even the most restless visitor found themselves breathing more deeply, more slowly, without knowing why. This was not magic. It was attention. Decades of attention poured into every small gesture until the gestures themselves had become a kind of language. The way he lifted the kettle said something about patience. The way he set down the cup said something about care. He had turned an ordinary act into something that could quiet a room. He was a gentle man, soft-spoken, unhurried, with a deep kindness in his face. He knew nothing of conflict. He had never raised his voice to anyone in his life. The most difficult thing he had ever done, he would sometimes joke, was wait for water to reach the right temperature. His world was small and calm and carefully tended. One day, while traveling through a neighboring province, the tea master accidentally bumped into a proud swordsman at a crowded market. It was a small thing, the kind of brush that happens in any busy street. But the swordsman was a man who took offense easily, and he saw in the tea master's fine clothing a person of some standing. "You have shown me disrespect," the swordsman said, his voice cold and even. "I am sorry," said the tea master, bowing. "It was an accident. I meant no disrespect at all." "Words are cheap," said the swordsman. "I demand a formal contest. Tomorrow morning, at the field outside the east gate. We will see then how much your apology is worth." The tea master stood very still. He had never held a sword. He had spent his life pouring tea. He knew, with quiet certainty, that if he faced this man with a weapon, things would go very badly for him. He spent the rest of the day in a state of deep unease. That evening, he sought out a Zen teacher who lived in a monastery nearby. He went to the teacher not for fighting lessons, but for something else entirely. "I do not know how to hold a sword," the tea master said. "I do not know how to face this man. I am afraid. Can you help me?" The teacher looked at him for a long while. "Tell me," she said, "when you prepare tea, what do you feel?" The question surprised him. He had expected advice about swordplay, or perhaps encouragement to run. Instead, she was asking about tea. "When I prepare tea," he said, "I feel nothing else. There is only the water, the cup, the leaves, my hands. The world outside the tea room disappears. I am only here, completely here. That is samadhi," the teacher said. "Total presence. And it is the most powerful thing a person can possess. More powerful than any weapon. A sword can only harm the body, but true presence reaches deeper. It touches something in the other person they may not even know is there. How can preparing tea be more powerful than a sword?" because the sword comes from fear, and fear is always unsteady. Presence comes from stillness, and stillness cannot be shaken. When you stand before that man tomorrow, he will be looking for fear in your eyes. If he finds it, he will feel justified. But if he finds only calm, only stillness, he will not know what to do. You will have changed the situation without lifting a finger. But what do I do tomorrow morning? Do I bring a sword? Bring your tea, she said. He waited for more. There was no more. Prepare tea as you always have. One last time. Give yourself completely to it. Be as present as you have ever been. That is all I can teach you. The tea master returned to his lodgings and thought about this through the night. He laid out his tools. His tea bowl, worn smooth from years of use. His bamboo whisk. His small iron kettle. The lacquered caddy that held the powdered tea. He looked at them for a long time, these companions of his life, and he felt a wave of gratitude so strong it surprised him. Whatever happened tomorrow, these objects, this practice, this quiet devotion, they had been his life. And it had been a good one. He did not sleep much. But the hours were not filled with dread. They were filled with something gentler, a kind of quieting. He thought about all the mornings he had risen early to heat the water, all the guests he had served, all the moments of stillness he had created in that small room. If this was to be his last cup of tea, he wanted it to be his best one. He wanted to be as fully present as he had ever been. As the sky began to lighten, he felt something settle in him. The fear was still there, but it had moved to the edges. In the center, there was only clarity. In the morning, he carried his tools to the field outside the east gate. The swordsman was already there, standing straight, his weapon at his side. A small group of onlookers had gathered, curious about this odd pairing, a warrior and a man carrying a tea set. The tea master set down his mat. He arranged his tools with the same care he would give to any ceremony. He knelt. He took a slow breath. And then, as if he were in his own tea room, as if no one else existed, he began to prepare tea. He heated the water over a small portable fire. He waited for it to reach the right temperature, not boiling, just below, so that the steam rose in a thin, steady ribbon. He measured the leaves with the same precision he had used 10,000 times before. He poured the water in a slow arc. He whisked the tea, the whisk making a soft, rhythmic sound in the quiet morning air. His hands did not tremble. His breathing was slow and even. His face was calm. He was entirely here, in this moment, with this cup, with this water, with this air. Everything else had fallen away. The swordsman, the crowd, the fear, all of it gone. There was only tea. The swordsman watched. He had expected nervousness. He had expected a man fumbling with an unfamiliar sword, awkward and easy to intimidate. Instead, he saw something he had not expected at all. He saw complete stillness, complete composure, a man so fully present that he seemed untouchable. The swordsman had faced many opponents. He knew what fear looked like. He knew what bravery looked like. But this was something else. This was a man who was not thinking about the confrontation at all, who had, in some way the swordsman could not quite understand, already moved beyond it. The tea master finished preparing the cup. He lifted it and took a sip. Then he looked up at the swordsman and, with perfect calm, offered him the second cup. The swordsman stood for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sheathed his sword. He looked at the tea master with an expression that was part confusion, part something deeper. "I came here to prove something," he said. "But I think you have already proven more than I could." He turned and walked away. The crowd parted for him, and then they dispersed too, quietly, as if something important had happened that they would need time to understand. The tea master sat alone in the field, his tea cooling in his hands. The morning light was soft on the grass. A bird sang somewhere in the trees. His heart was beating quickly, he noticed. The fear had not entirely left. It was there, somewhere in his chest, but it was smaller now. It had been held by something larger, by presence, by attention, by the simple act of pouring tea. He understood then what the Zen teacher had meant. Presence had not removed his fear. It had made room for it. It had surrounded the fear with something wider and calmer, and in that wider space, the fear lost its power. It was still there, but it no longer controlled him. He finished his tea. Then he packed his tools carefully, one by one, and went home. This story has been told in Zen circles for generations because it captures something essential about the nature of presence. The tea master did not become a warrior. He did not learn to fight. He did not overcome his fear through willpower or strategy. He simply became so fully present that fear could not find a foothold. When every part of the mind is here, in this breath, in this gesture, in this moment, there is no room for worry about what might happen next. Worry lives in the future, and the tea master, for those few minutes in that field, had no future. He had only the tea. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." This is what the tea master did, so completely that even a man with a sword could feel it. A Zen student once asked a teacher, "What is the most important moment?" The teacher said, "This one." "And the most important person?" "The one you are with." "And the most important thing to do?" "Whatever you are doing right now." The student thought about this. "That seems too simple." "Try it," said the teacher. "For one day, give yourself completely to whatever is in front of you. When you eat breakfast, eat breakfast. When you sweep the courtyard, sweep the courtyard. When you speak with someone, be fully there with them. Do nothing else with your mind. And at the end of the day, tell me if it was simple." The student tried, and by midday, he understood. Giving full attention to one thing at a time was one of the hardest things he had ever attempted. His mind wanted to be in 3 places at once. It wanted to plan the afternoon while he ate the morning meal. It wanted to rehearse conversations that had not happened yet. It wanted to be anywhere except here. But in the moments when he managed it, in the moments when he was fully with the broom, or fully with the bowl of rice, or fully with the person in front of him, something shifted. The task became easier. The food tasted better. The person seemed more real, more alive, more present themselves, as if attention was something shared, something that grows when 2 people bring it to the same moment. He noticed something else too. In the moments of full attention, the low hum of worry that usually ran beneath his thoughts went quiet. It did not disappear because he fought it. It disappeared because there was no room for it. His mind was full of this step, this bowl, this person, and this was enough to fill it completely. He returned to the teacher that evening. Was it simple? The teacher asked. It was the hardest simple thing I have ever done, the student said. The teacher nodded. Good. That is exactly what it should feel like. The path to peace runs through attention. Most of us spend our whole lives half present, half somewhere else. We are here, but our minds are already in tomorrow. We are with someone, but we are also with our own thoughts. The practice is just this. Come back. Again and again. Come all the way back to where your body is. And the breath? The breath is the simplest way home. It is always happening in this moment. You cannot breathe yesterday's air. You cannot breathe tomorrow's. Each breath is now. So, when the mind wanders to tomorrow or circles back to yesterday, the breath says, here. You are here. The tea master understood this without having studied it in any formal way. He had not read the sutras. He had not sat long meditation retreats. He had simply spent a lifetime pouring tea with full attention. And that attention, cultivated quietly over thousands of cups, became something strong enough to calm a field of conflict. This is one of the quiet promises of the Zen path. That presence, built slowly through ordinary acts done with full attention, becomes a kind of ground we can stand on in any situation. Washing a dish with full attention, walking to the door with full attention, listening to someone with full attention. These are not small things. They are the whole practice, hidden in plain sight. The Buddha did not ask people to leave their lives behind and enter caves. He asked them to be where they were, fully. To pay attention to what was happening now. To notice the breath, the body, the sounds around them, the taste of the food, the weight of the step. He asked them to stop living one step ahead of themselves and simply arrive. This is perhaps the simplest teaching in all of Buddhism and the hardest to follow, because the mind has been wandering for so long. It has been planning and rehearsing and replaying for years, for decades. It does not settle easily, but it does settle. Like the tea master's hands, which were once uncertain and are now perfectly steady, the mind, too, learns stillness through repetition, through the gentle, daily practice of coming back. One cup of tea at a time, one breath at a time. The tea master arrived. In that field, with his worn bowl and his bamboo whisk, he arrived so completely that even a man with a sword could feel the weight of his presence and chose to walk away. We do not need a tea room or a bamboo whisk. We need only this breath, this moment, this willingness to be here, all the way here, for the space of one inhale and one exhale, and then the next, and then the next. That is enough. That has always been enough. Let us rest here. Feel the weight of the body. Feel the breath as it comes and goes, unhurried and complete. There is only this moment, and it is more than enough. We will continue when you are ready. There is a happiness that has no cause. This is one of the most surprising teachings in all of Buddhism. We are so accustomed to thinking of happiness as something that depends on circumstances, something that arrives when we get what we want and leaves when we do not, that the idea of a happiness without cause can sound almost impossible. and yet the Buddhist tradition insists on it. There is a well-being that lives beneath the surface of our busy minds, present all the time, waiting for nothing. It does not need to be earned or achieved. It only needs to be uncovered. The Buddha had a word for this. He called it sukha. It means something close to deep well-being, a contentment that does not depend on things going a certain way. And he taught that it is available to everyone. It is simply what remains when the mind becomes still. Let us explore a story about a young monk and an elder who lived together in a small Buddhist monastery in the hills. The young monk had been practicing meditation for some time. He sat each morning and each evening, faithfully, following the instructions he had been given. He watched his breath. He observed his thoughts. He tried to be present. And for the most part, he felt that he was doing reasonably well. His mind was a little calmer than it had been when he first arrived. He argued with himself less. He slept a little better. But something was missing. He had heard the elder speak of joy in meditation, of a happiness that arose from stillness, of a peace so deep it brought tears. And the young monk felt none of this. His meditation was steady but flat, like a grey sky that never rained but never cleared either. Day after day, the same even greyness. One afternoon, he found the elder sitting in the courtyard near the old stone well. The sun was low, and the courtyard was warm and quiet. Butterflies moved among the wildflowers that grew along the wall. "May I ask you something?" the young monk said. "Of course. I have been sitting for many months now, and I feel some calm. But I do not feel the joy you speak of. I do not feel the happiness that the old teachings describe. Where is it? What am I doing wrong?" The elder looked at him kindly. She did not answer right away. Instead, she stood up and walked to the well. She picked up the wooden bucket and lowered it on its rope. When she brought it up, the water inside was cloudy. Silt and fine sediment swirled through it, stirred up by the motion of the bucket hitting the surface. "Look at this water," she said. "What do you see?" "It is cloudy," said the young monk. "I cannot see through it." "Wait," she said. She set the bucket down on the stone rim of the well. They sat beside it together. The elder said nothing more. The young monk watched the water. At first, nothing seemed to change. The water was a dull, murky brown, moving faintly with the settling of the silt. But slowly, very slowly, the particles began to drift downward. The heavier ones first, then the finer ones. The water near the top of the bucket began to clear. A faint transparency appeared, then grew. After some minutes, the water was still, and it was clear. Through it, the young monk could see the bottom of the bucket. Smooth wood, clean and simple, with a few small pebbles resting there that must have been carried up from the well. "Where did the clarity come from?" the elder asked. "It was there the whole time," the young monk said. "Under the silt." "Yes. And where did the silt go?" "It settled. It sank to the bottom." "Did you push it down?" "No. I just waited." The elder smiled. "This is your mind," she said. "The joy you are looking for is already in the water. It has always been there. But you are so busy stirring, so busy trying to find it, that you keep the silt moving. Every time you ask yourself, where is the joy? What am I doing wrong? Why is this not working? You are lowering the bucket again. You are stirring up the water. The clarity cannot appear because you will not let it settle. The young monk looked at the still, clear water in the bucket. The afternoon light moved through it, catching the edges of the pebbles at the bottom. So the joy comes when I stop looking for it? He said. The joy comes when you stop stirring, said the elder. When the mind is still, what is already there becomes visible. You do not create clarity. You allow it. The young monk thought about this. He looked at the bucket again. The water was perfectly clear now, catching the afternoon light in a way that made the whole bucket seem to glow from within. But I have been trying so hard, he said. I sit every morning and every evening. I follow every instruction. I count my breaths. I watch my thoughts. I do everything I am supposed to do. Yes, said the elder. And that is the stirring. He looked at her, surprised. Every time you sit down and think, now I will meditate well, you are stirring. Every time you check how calm you feel, you are stirring. Every time you compare today's sitting to yesterday's, or wonder why you are not progressing faster, you are lowering the bucket into the water again. The silt flies up, and you cannot see through it. Then what am I supposed to do? Less, she said. Much less. Sit down. Breathe. Let the breath be ordinary. Let the mind do what it does. And if nothing special happens, good. If the mind wanders, fine. If you feel restless, that is allowed too. Stop measuring your practice. Stop grading it. Just sit, the way you are sitting now, on a warm afternoon, beside a well, with nowhere to be. That is the whole instruction. It sounds too easy. It is easy to describe. It is hard to trust, because we have been taught our whole lives that effort leads to results, and more effort leads to better results. And in many areas of life, this is true. But the mind is different. The mind settles when we leave it alone. Like water. Like dust in a room after everyone has left. Like a pond in the evening after the swimmers have gone home. The young monk sat quietly, absorbing this. A butterfly landed on the rim of the bucket, rested there for a moment, then lifted away. One more thing, said the elder. The silt does not disappear. It is still there, at the bottom of the bucket. Your thoughts, your worries, your habits of mind, they do not vanish. They settle. And when they settle, you can see past them. That is all. You can see past them to what has been there all along. The Buddhist tradition describes something beautiful about what happens when the mind begins to settle. It comes in stages, gently, like dawn. The first thing that appears is a quality of wonder, a quiet surprise at being alive, at being here, at noticing the breath as if for the first time. It is a freshness, like seeing the world after a long sleep. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The sound of rain on a roof, the warmth of sunlight on the hands, the simple fact of breathing. These things, which we have experienced thousands of times, suddenly seem remarkable. As if we have been walking through a garden with our eyes half closed and have just now opened them fully. After wonder comes a quality of warmth, a gentle, bodily sense of well-being. It is not caused by anything in particular. It is simply there, like the warmth of the sun on the skin after stepping out of shade. The body feels lighter. The chest opens slightly. There is a feeling of being held, though nothing is holding us. It spreads through the body quietly, without announcement. Then comes a deeper happiness. This is the happiness the young monk was looking for and could not find through effort. It is a contentment that does not depend on anything going well. It does not require good news or pleasant circumstances. It is the happiness of simply being, of existing, of sitting in a courtyard on a warm afternoon, breathing, alive. The Buddhist teachers describe this as the happiness of a person who has set down a heavy burden and is resting by the road. The weight is gone. The relief is complete. And finally, if the stillness deepens further, there is something the tradition calls equanimity, a vast, open spaciousness in which everything is welcome and nothing needs to change. Pleasant feelings arise and are held gently. Difficult feelings arise and are held gently. Thoughts come and go. Sounds come and go. And through it all, there is a calm awareness that remains undisturbed, like the deep water of a lake that stays still even when the surface is touched by wind. The Buddha described this state as one of profound rest. He said, "There is no higher happiness than peace." And he meant this literally. The happiness of having what we want is real, but it fades. The happiness of peace, of stillness, of simply being, does not fade. It deepens. These stages are described in the old Buddhist texts, and they have been experienced by meditators for thousands of years. They are real. They happen. And they arise on their own, in their own time, when the conditions are right. Which means, when we stop stirring. The young monk and the elder sat together for a while longer in the courtyard. The sun had moved behind the trees, and the light was softer now, golden and diffused. "I have one more question," the young monk said. "Please, if the joy is already there and I only need to stop stirring, why is it so hard? Why do I keep reaching for it? Why does my mind keep moving?" The elder considered this. "Because you have been stirring for a very long time," she said. "Your whole life, in fact. We are all taught from a very young age that happiness is something to chase, something to earn, something that lives in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next experience. The mind learns to reach, and it becomes a habit, a deep one. Can the habit be unlearned? It is already unlearning itself," she said. "Every time you sit and let the breath be simple, every time you notice the stirring and choose to let it settle, the habit weakens a little. You may not feel it day to day, but it is happening. The water is getting clearer. How do I know when it has cleared?" The elder laughed softly. "You will not need to ask. You will simply notice that you are sitting in the courtyard, watching butterflies, and you are happy. And you will not be able to point to a reason. That is how you will know." The young monk smiled. It was a small smile, but there was something genuine in it. Something that had not been there when the conversation began. "There," said the elder. "That. Right now. Did you notice?" He had. For just a moment, without trying, without reaching, something had settled in him. A small clearing in the water. Brief and quiet and real. "That is the beginning," she said. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition that has been repeated so many times it has almost become a proverb, but it holds so much truth. A Zen master was asked, "What is enlightenment?" And he said, When you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, rest. The student said, "But everyone does that." "Everyone eats," said the master. "But most people eat while thinking about something else. They eat while planning. They eat while worrying. Their body is at the table, but their mind is somewhere else entirely. So they finish the meal and they have not really eaten at all. They have not tasted the rice. They have not felt the warmth of the tea. They were not there for it." And resting, the same. Most people rest while thinking about what they should be doing instead. They lie down, but their mind stands up and paces the room. They close their eyes, but their thoughts open 100 doors. That is not rest. That is work, done in a reclining position. The student laughed. "To eat when you eat," the master continued. "To rest when you rest. To be fully here for the simplest acts of your life. That is not a small thing. That is the whole teaching." The student thought about this for a while. "It sounds like you are describing happiness." "I am," said the master. "The simplest kind. The kind that does not depend on anything special happening. Just the happiness of being fully alive in an ordinary moment. The taste of rice when you really taste it. The feeling of rest when you really rest. The sound of rain when you really listen to it. These are not small pleasures. They are the deepest ones. We have just forgotten how to receive them. The joy that the Buddhist tradition speaks of is this kind of joy. It is the happiness of being undivided, of being all in one place, at one time, doing one thing. When the mind is not split between here and elsewhere, between now and later, between what is and what should be, a natural well-being arises. The Buddha did not invent this happiness. He simply noticed that it was there all along, hidden beneath the noise. And the path to it is gentle. It does not require years of discipline or superhuman effort. It requires something much simpler and, in its own way, much harder. It requires us to stop, to sit still, to let the water settle, to trust that the clarity is already there, beneath the silt, waiting patiently for us to leave it alone. The breath helps. Each breath is a moment of settling. The inhale arrives, the exhale departs, and in the small pause between them, the water clears a little more. We do not need to do anything with the breath. We only need to let it happen and notice it happening. That noticing, that simple, quiet attention, is itself the clearing of the water. And here is the kindest part of this teaching. We do not need to wait until the water is perfectly clear to feel the benefit. Even a small clearing is enough. Even a moment when the silt settles slightly and we catch a glimpse of what is beneath. A single breath of true calm. A single moment of being fully here. That is already the joy the young monk was looking for. He was looking for it as a destination, a place he would arrive at and stay. But it comes in moments, in glimpses, in single breaths, and each one is complete. The joy is already here. It has always been here. Beneath the plans, beneath the worries, beneath the endless stirring, like clear water beneath the silt, like smooth pebbles at the bottom of a bucket, catching the afternoon light. Let us rest here for a moment. There is nothing to reach for, nothing to figure out, just the breath, settling in the body, gentle and steady. Take your time. We will continue when you are ready. In the Buddhist tradition, the most important teachings are often the shortest. A single phrase, a few words, something so simple that it can be carried in the palm of the hand and held there for a lifetime. Tonight, we come to the last of our stories, and the teachings in them are among the simplest of all. One is about a woman who found peace in the most ordinary of places. The other is about an old teacher's final words. Both arrive at the same quiet truth, that what we are looking for has been here all along. Let us explore a story about a queen. She lived in an ancient kingdom, in a grand palace, surrounded by gardens and courtyards and tall stone walls. She had servants and advisors and every comfort a person could ask for. From the outside, her life looked like one of ease and plenty. But the queen could not sleep. Years earlier, someone she loved very much had been taken from her suddenly. It happened within the walls of the palace itself, during a time of unrest. She did not wish to speak of the details, and no one pressed her to. But the loss lived inside her like a stone. It sat in her chest during the day and pressed against her ribs at night. And when darkness came and the palace grew quiet, the fear came with it. Every sound in the corridors made her heart quicken. Every shadow held a memory. She tried everything. Healers came with herbs and teas. Priests came with prayers and rituals. Scholars came with advice about the nature of the mind. Musicians played soft melodies outside her chamber at night. Nothing worked. The sleeplessness went on for years, wearing her down slowly, dimming the light in her eyes. One day, a traveler passed through the kingdom and mentioned, in passing, that there was a Buddhist teacher who lived simply in the forest beyond the eastern hills. He was said to be very wise, though he taught very little. Most people who visited him came away with only a sentence or two. But those sentences, they said, were enough. The queen sent for him. He would not come to the palace. So she went to him. She found him in a small clearing, sitting beneath a tree. He was old, with a weathered face and calm eyes. His robes were simple and patched. He was eating a bowl of rice when she arrived. She told him who she was. He nodded politely, but did not seem impressed by her title. She told him about the loss, briefly, and about the years of sleeplessness. He listened without interrupting. When she was finished, he set down his bowl. "What have you tried?" he asked. She listed everything. The herbs, the prayers, the music, the scholars. He nodded, and none of it worked. No, because none of it addressed the real problem, he said. The problem is not that you cannot sleep. The problem is that your mind will not rest. It is caught in a loop, replaying the past, fearing the future. And no herb or prayer can reach it there. Only you can. How? With the breath, he said. She waited for more. He did not offer more. That is all? She said. That is all. When you lie down at night, do not try to sleep. Do not try to quiet the mind. Just feel the breath. One breath at a time. Feel the air come in. Feel it go out. That is your only task. If the mind wanders to the past, return to the breath. If it races toward tomorrow, return to the breath. Again and again, as many times as it takes. And this will help me sleep? I do not know, he said honestly, but it will help you rest. And rest is what you need. The queen returned to the palace. That night, she lay in her chamber and did as the teacher said. She felt her breath. One breath in, one breath out. Her mind wandered almost immediately. Memories surged. The fear rose. But she returned to the breath and wandered again and returned again. For hours, it seemed, she did nothing but wander and return, wander and return. She grew frustrated with herself. This was supposed to be simple. One breath. How hard could it be? And yet the mind refused to stay. It flew to the past, to the future, to every corner of worry it could find. But somewhere in the wandering and returning, something began to shift. The breath became a kind of anchor. Each return to it was a small act of steadying. Like a ship finding its mooring after being tossed in open water. The mooring did not stop the waves, but it gave her something to hold to. She noticed something else. In the brief moments when she was truly with the breath, the fear quieted. It did not disappear, but it moved to the background, like the sound of distant rain. It was still there, but it was no longer the only thing she could hear. Over the following weeks, she continued. Some nights were easier than others. Some nights the memories came strong, and she lay awake for hours, breathing, returning, breathing. But gradually, so gradually she almost did not notice, the space between the breaths grew calmer. The fear softened at the edges. The returning became easier. She began to recognize the breath as something familiar, something safe, like the voice of a friend who had been speaking all along, and she was only now learning to listen. And one night, without trying, without even noticing the moment it happened, she fell asleep. She woke in the morning with sunlight on her face and a feeling she had almost forgotten. Rest. True rest. The kind that reaches all the way down to the bones. She went back to the forest to see the teacher. He was sitting in the same clearing, beneath the same tree. It worked, she said. He smiled. The breath worked? Yes. I do not know what else the path has to teach me, she said. But this alone is a blessing. That is often how it begins, he said. With something so small we almost overlook it. One breath, one moment of presence, and from there, everything else follows. She asked him if there was more she should learn. More teachings, more practices, more truths. He thought about this for a while, watching a line of ants crossing the clearing floor in a patient, winding procession. The Buddha taught for 45 years, he said. He gave thousands of discourses. He answered countless questions. And at the heart of all of it, at the very center, was this: pay attention, be present, let go. Everything else is commentary. That is all? That is all. But it is also everything. A lifetime is barely enough to learn it fully. And yet, you have already begun. You have already felt what it is like to return to the breath and find peace there. That is the seed. It will grow on its own if you let it. He paused, then added, "There is a teaching from the Buddha that I carry with me." He said, breathing in, I calm my body and my mind. Breathing out, I smile. That is the whole of my practice. Some days I do not even get past the first breath before I am at peace. Some days it takes longer, but the breath is always there. It never leaves. It is the most faithful companion we will ever have." The queen thanked him and returned to the palace. She lived many more years, and she slept well for most of them. And in the mornings, before the palace woke and the business of the kingdom began, she would sit by her window and breathe, watching the light come in over the hills. It became her favorite part of the day. She had not found anything new. She had simply learned to receive what had always been there. In the final season of the Buddha's life, when his years of teaching were drawing to a close, he traveled to a grove of sala trees near a small town at the edge of the plains. He was tired. He had been walking and teaching for 45 years, and his body was old. He asked his attendant to prepare a place for him between two of the great trees. A simple bed, with the head pointing north. He lay down on his right side, one hand beneath his head, and looked out at the gathering of students and friends who had followed him there. It was evening. The air was warm and still. Insects hummed in the long grass. The sky was turning from gold to violet at the edges, and the first stars were beginning to show through the canopy of leaves. And something remarkable happened. The sala trees, though it was not their season, began to bloom. Flowers fell from the branches, landing softly on the ground, on the folds of his robe, on the open palms of those who sat nearby. As if the forest itself knew what was happening and was offering the only gift it had. His students were gathered around him, sitting close, their faces quiet and open. Some had been with him for decades. Some were newer to the path. All of them could feel that this evening was different from other evenings. That something was coming to completion. The Buddha saw their faces, one by one, in the fading light. He knew what they were feeling, and so he offered them his final teaching. He did not choose a complex doctrine. He did not recite a sutra or give a lengthy discourse. He spoke a single sentence, and it was the simplest thing he had ever said, and perhaps the most important. Be a light unto yourselves. 5 words. The last words of the greatest teacher in the Buddhist tradition, and they were not about him. They were about the people in front of him. They were saying, "You have everything you need. The light is already within you. You do not need a teacher to hold it for you. You do not need permission to shine. The wisdom, the peace, the understanding, it has been growing in you all along. Trust it. Rest in it. Be your own lamp." The flowers continued to fall. The evening deepened, and the Buddha closed his eyes. A beloved Zen master, many centuries later, was asked to summarize the entire Buddhist teaching in the fewest possible words. He said 3, not always so. Whatever it is, not always so. The pain that feels permanent will shift. The worry that seems endless will loosen. The restlessness, the sadness, the noise of the mind, all of it is moving, always changing. And in that constant change, there is peace. Because if nothing stays the same, then nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be forced. We only need to let it move. Let it pass. Let it breathe. This is the teaching of impermanence, and it is at the heart of everything the Buddha taught. It sounds, at first, like it might be sad. If nothing lasts, what is the point? But the Buddhist tradition sees it differently. If nothing lasts, then the difficult things will pass. The heavy things will lighten. The dark night will give way to morning. And every breath is a fresh start. Every moment is new. This night will pass. Tomorrow will come and it will be different from today. The feelings that are here now, whatever they are, will change. They always do. The moon waxes and wanes. The seasons turn. The breath comes and goes. Everything alive moves in rhythm. And we are part of that rhythm. We always have been. Not always so. These 3 words hold the whole teaching. They hold the stonecutter's journey and the fisherman's empty boat. They hold the monk's quiet, "Is that so?" and the student's realization in the garden. They hold the tea master's steady hands and the elder's clear water. They hold Ananda's gentle surrender in the dark before dawn. And they hold this moment too, right now, with the breath moving softly in the body and the night settling around us. The Buddha's final instruction was to be a light. And perhaps the simplest way to understand this is to think of what a light does. It does not strain. It does not try. It simply shines by its nature, because that is what light does. A candle does not effort to glow. It is lit and it gives light. That is all. The same is true of awareness. It is already lit. It has been shining since the moment we were born. Through every difficulty and every joy, through every restless night and every quiet morning, the awareness that watches it all has been steady and clear. We may forget it. We may cover it with worry or noise or distraction. But it is always there, like a candle in a window, waiting for us to notice it again. And the breath is how we notice. Each breath is a small return to the light. Each exhale is a letting go of what covers it. We do not need to do anything extraordinary. We do not need to become anyone we are not. We only need to breathe and notice and allow the light that is already here to do what it has always done. The Queen found her rest through a single breath. The Buddha offered his final wisdom in a single sentence. The Zen master summarized the whole tradition in 3 words. The deepest truths are the simplest ones. They have been here all along, closer than close, quieter than quiet. In the breath, in the body, in this moment. We began this evening with a fisherman on a river, learning to let the empty boats drift past. We walked with a stonecutter who traveled the whole world and came home to find that home was enough. We sat with teachers and students and monks and queens, and in every story, the same quiet truth was waiting. Peace is not something far away. It is not something to earn or achieve. It is what remains when we stop reaching. It is what appears when we let the water settle. It is the light that was always shining, behind every cloud, in every breath. The Buddha's last words were, "Be a light unto yourselves." And perhaps the most beautiful thing about these words is how little they ask of us. They do not say, "Be a brighter light." They do not say, "Try harder to shine." They say, "You are already a light. You have always been. Simply trust that. Simply rest in that. And let it be enough." Let us pause here one last time. Let the body rest. Let the breath come and go on its own, gently and without effort. Everything we have heard tonight is settling, like silt in still water. There is nothing to hold on to. There is nothing to remember. The teachings will find their own place, in their own time. For now, there is only this: the breath, the quiet, the peace that was always here. When you are ready, we will close together. There is one more teaching from the Buddhist tradition that we have not yet spoken of tonight. And it may be the most important one of all. The Buddha taught compassion. He taught it constantly, in nearly every discourse, in nearly every story. Be kind to others. Be generous. Be patient. Understand that every person you meet is carrying something difficult, and treat them gently. But there was a part of this teaching that many people overlooked, and still overlook today. The Buddha also said, include yourself. A Zen student once asked a teacher, how do I practice compassion? Start close, the teacher said. Start with the person who is easiest to forget. Who is that? You. This is a simple idea, and yet it is one of the hardest things for most of us to do. We are kind to our friends. We are patient with children. We forgive the people we love. But when it comes to ourselves, we are often the harshest judge in the room. We hold ourselves to standards we would never impose on anyone else. We replay our mistakes long after everyone else has forgotten them. We lie awake, cataloging the things we should have done differently, said differently, been differently. The Buddhist tradition calls this the near enemy of compassion. It looks like caring because it is so intense and so personal. But it is not caring. It is a kind of quiet harshness we direct inward, often without realizing it. The Buddha's teaching on loving kindness, which the old texts call metta, begins with a radical instruction. Before you extend kindness to anyone else, offer it to yourself. This is the foundation, because a person who cannot be gentle with their own heart will struggle to be truly gentle with anyone else's. There is a story about a Buddhist monk who spent many years practicing compassion. He was kind to everyone he met. He fed the hungry, listened to the grieving, cared for the sick. He was admired by the whole community for his generosity of spirit. But one day, a visiting teacher sat with him and said, "You are very kind to others, but I notice you are not kind to yourself. You eat poorly. You sleep too little. You push yourself past exhaustion. You speak to yourself in your own mind with a harshness you would never use with another person." The monk was startled. He had never considered this. Compassion that leaves you out is incomplete, the teacher said. It is like a circle with a gap in it. Close the circle. Include yourself. Then the compassion is whole. And what does this look like? It is simple. It is the willingness to say, quietly, to ourselves, I have done my best today. It may not have been perfect. It may not have been enough by the standards I set for myself. But it was my best, given what I had, given what I knew, given who I am right now. And that is enough. It is the willingness to treat our own tiredness with the same care we would offer a tired friend. To meet our own confusion with patience. To hold our own sadness gently, the way we would hold a child who came to us in tears. The breath is part of this too. Each breath is an act of kindness the body performs for itself, without being asked, without needing to earn it. The lungs open and fill. The heart beats and sends blood to every corner. The body cares for itself, moment by moment, with a faithfulness we rarely notice and almost never thank it for. Tonight, as this evening draws to a close, this is the last thing worth remembering. Whatever happened today, whatever was said or left unsaid, whatever went well or did not, it is over now. The breath is still here. The body is still here. and both of them are asking for the same thing they have always asked for: kindness, rest, permission to let go. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Let that settle. Let it be true, just for tonight. Tomorrow can take care of itself. Right now, there is only this breath and the quiet permission to be exactly as we are." Let us rest here one last time. Let the body soften. Let the breath do what it has always done, gently, faithfully, without asking anything in return. We are almost done. When you are ready, we will close together. And so we come to the end of our evening together. We have traveled a long way tonight. We sat beside a fisherman on a river and watched the empty boats drift past. We walked with a stonecutter who searched the whole world for what was already in his hands. We listened to a Zen monk answer every twist of fortune with 3 quiet words. We climbed a mountain with a young student and learned that the breath has been teaching us since the day we were born. We met our own anger and found that it was only a visitor. We watched Ananda finally rest, and in that resting, find what 25 years of effort could not give him. We sat with a tea master whose presence was stronger than any sword. We watched the silt settle in a bucket of water and saw the joy that was always there beneath it. We heard the Buddha's final words, spoken beneath falling flowers: "Be a light unto yourselves." And through it all, the breath was here. It has always been here. It is here now. There is nothing left to carry, nothing left to figure out. The stories will settle in their own time, like seeds in good soil. For now, there is only the quiet and the breath and the permission to rest. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.